Good evening. As the night deepens, we turn the pages back to an era of impossible ambition, to a time when American ingenuity faced down the raw, unforgiving wilderness of the early 19th century. Our focus tonight is the creation of a ditch, a massive 363-mile-long artificial river that would fundamentally redefine the geography, economy, and ultimate destiny of the young United States, the Erie Canal. Before it was a waterway, the canal was a dream, carried forward by a small band of relentless advocates, often ridiculed as madmen. The year is 1817, and the vision is championed most fervently by DeWitt Clinton, then mayor of New York City and later its governor. The sheer scale of the proposal invited mockery. Critics, especially those from rival states, dismissively labeled it Clinton's Ditch and the Grand Canal humbug. To propose cutting a navigable channel across the entire breadth of New York State, linking the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, seemed a folly of almost biblical proportions. There were no civil engineers in America capable of supervising such a task. There were no established construction firms, no steam shovels, and no federal aid. The project was entirely dependent on New York State's own resources and the sheer will of its people. The route itself presented formidable obstacles: a wilderness of dense hardwood forests, impenetrable swamps, and the 60-foot sheer limestone ridge known as the Niagara Escarpment, which necessitated the creation of complex lock systems. The entire venture was, literally and figuratively, being carved out of nothing. The actual work began on July 4, 1817, near Rome, New York. The tools were simple, almost primitive: shovels, picks, scrapers, wheelbarrows, and the raw muscle of thousands of laborers. Much of the excavation was accomplished by the canal barrows, wooden wheelbarrows often pushed by hand. Men dug through clay, shale, and the infamous muck of the Montezuma Marsh, a vast malarial wetland where mosquitoes were a constant debilitating foe. The heat of summer brought fever and disease, slowing the pace of work and thinning the ranks of the labor force. It was a testament to human endurance, carried out with an almost rhythmic, monotonous dedication. The engineers, many of them self-taught surveyors, had to invent solutions as they went. They used a simple level in transit, often relying on crude measurements and trial and error to maintain the required depth and gradient of the channel. For instance, creating the locks, chambers designed to raise and lower boats between different water levels, was an immense undertaking. These structures required hundreds of tons of carefully cut limestone, held together by hydraulic cement, a newly rediscovered material that could harden underwater. The planning and placement of the first lock, Lock Number 1 in Waterford, took months of meticulous, painstaking work, often conducted by lantern light. The financial risk was equally profound. The state sold bonds to finance the project, betting its future solvency on the success of a mud and rock trench. Yet the work continued, section by section. The goal was not a rapid dash, but a slow, steady accretion of progress, a few yards gained each day. The rhythmic sound of the axe felling trees, the pick breaking the soil, and the grunt of men pushing laden wheelbarrows became the ambient noise of upstate New York. It was a monotonous yet crucial sound, the low hum of an industrial revolution being built by hand. By the time the initial segment opened in 1819, the doubters began to quiet. The first few barges, carrying lumber and local produce, demonstrated that the impossible ditch was indeed possible. This early success proved that the visionaries had not been mad, but merely ahead of their time. The groundwork was laid, not just for a canal, but for an economic transformation that was about to launch New York into the forefront of American power. The slow, arduous genesis of the Grand Canal was complete, setting the stage for the glorious yet sleepy golden age of the packet boats. The sound of the pickaxe and the shovel slowly faded, replaced by the gentle, continuous rhythm of the water and the clip-clop of a horse's hooves. With the official opening of the Erie Canal in 1825, the impossible ditch became the nation's most vital artery, ushering in what would be known as its golden age. This was not an age of speed, but of measured, predictable, and transformative travel. Imagine yourself standing on the earthen towpath, the narrow lane running parallel to the water. The air is thick with the scent of pine and moist earth. A packet boat, long and narrow, glides past, its hull almost silent as it parts the brown water. The power source is not steam, but muscle. A team of 2 or 3 mules or horses, sometimes blindfolded, walking steadily along the towpath, attached to the boat by a long, heavy rope known as the tow line. The speed of travel was famously leisurely, dictated by state regulations designed to prevent the wake from eroding the banks. Most boats moved at a steady, soporific pace of about 4 miles per hour. This slowness was not a bug, it was a feature. It allowed passengers, often crammed tightly into the cabins of the fast packet boats, to experience the landscape unfolding like a long, slow panorama. They could step out, stretch their legs on the towpath while the boat was momentarily delayed at a lock, and simply watch the new America pass by. Life on the canal was governed by a quiet, predictable routine. The captain, the cook, the lock tenders, and especially the hoggy, the young boy responsible for walking and driving the animals, all fell into a mesmerizing pattern. The most vital crew member was perhaps the hoggy, whose job demanded an almost hypnotic repetition, guiding the team for hours on end, sometimes switching to a fresh team in the dead of night. Their feet shuffling through the gravel, the only sound the harness jingling and the occasional soft command to the mules. The canal quickly became the economic backbone of New York, earning it the nickname the Empire State. Before the canal, shipping goods from the interior, like Buffalo, to New York City cost around $100 per ton. With the canal operational, that cost plummeted to under $10 per ton. This staggering reduction in freight rates connected the farmers and lumber mills of the American frontier to the global markets of the Atlantic. Cargo ranged from vast quantities of timber and wheat to barrels of salt and potash. The steady arrival of these goods fueled the explosive growth of New York City into the continent's preeminent financial center. Crucial to the canal's rhythm were the locks. These stone chambers, spaced out along the waterway to handle the vertical changes in elevation, were the pulse points of the journey. As a boat approached, a lock tender, often living right beside his lockhouse, would begin the slow process of turning the massive wooden cranks. The large gates would swing inward, and the boat would drift into the chamber. Then the careful, noisy process of filling or emptying the chamber with water would begin, a cascade of rushing water followed by the gentle, bobbing ascent or descent of the boat. The noise of the rushing water would be the brief, energetic disruption in the evening's quietude before the boat would gently glide out onto the next level of the canal. This period of the mid-19th century was the zenith of the towpath economy. It fostered the growth of towns like Syracuse, Rochester, and Utica, transforming them from small settlements into bustling commercial hubs. It was an age defined by the quiet clip of hooves, the low horn signaling an approach to a bend, and the slow, steady flow of prosperity. A perfect rhythmic backdrop for a long night's rest. As the canal approached the mid-19th century, its golden glow began to dim, not with a sudden shock, but with the steady, insistent beat of a new technological marvel, the iron horse. The railroad arrived not as a rival, but initially as a complement. Early rail lines, such as the Mohawk and Hudson, were built to connect cities like Albany and Schenectady, shortening the overland gaps and feeding passengers directly back onto the canal boats. The logic was simple. The canal was cheaper for heavy cargo, while the rail was faster for passengers and mail. But the inherent advantage of the railroad, speed, soon became an insurmountable economic force. The canal, for all its revolutionary impact, was constrained by its physics. A boat's speed was limited to roughly 4 miles per hour to prevent bank erosion, and the whole system was utterly immobilized by the 5-month freeze of the New York winter. The steam-powered locomotive, by contrast, could cover the same 363 miles in a fraction of the time, and crucially, it could operate year-round, 7 days a week. Starting in the 1840s and accelerating in the 1850s, the tracks of major rail lines, such as the New York Central Railroad, began to lay parallel to the very route of the Erie Canal. At first, the canal fought back. New York State spent fortunes widening and deepening the canal in a series of enlargements, allowing for bigger barges and slightly more capacity. These efforts slowed the decline, but they could not reverse the inevitable march of progress. The character of the canal began to change. The glamorous packet boats, which carried the gentry and the quickly moving passengers, vanished first, their slow pace no match for the rail lines. What remained were the freight barges, the heavy haulers of bulk cargo, grain, coal, and stone. The atmosphere shifted from one of bustling commerce to one of slow, steady persistence. The vibrant shouts of the canal towns quieted, and the sound of the steam whistle, high and mournful, began to echo more frequently than the low horn of the approaching mule boat. The year 1882 marked a significant point. New York State abolished all tolls on the canal. This decision, intended to help the waterway compete, essentially conceded that the canal was no longer a profitable enterprise, but a public utility, a historical necessity. It was around this time that the iconic figures of the Golden Age, the lock tenders, the hoggies, and the packet captains, began to leave for work on the rails or in the growing cities. The 20th century saw the canal transition completely. It was modernized into the New York State Barge Canal System, a much larger, deeper waterway capable of handling industrial steam barges. But even this effort could not compete with the rise of trucking and the massive St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959. Commercial traffic dwindled to nearly nothing. The grand achievement of the 19th century had been surpassed, leaving behind a tranquil, enduring monument. Today, the Erie Canal is no longer an artery of industry, but a beautiful, quiet ribbon of water dedicated almost entirely to recreation and heritage. The low, rhythmic movement of the towpath has been replaced by the glide of recreational vessels and the slow, deliberate pace of history lovers walking the same banks that once buzzed with commerce. The Iron Horse won the race for speed, but the canal has won the battle for soul. It remains a peaceful, constant presence, a watery line reminding us that while progress is rapid and loud, history often settles into a calm, quiet flow, perfect for guiding us toward our slumber.